Crossover athletes. In the early 1990s, a quiet shift begins. Former college football players, many undrafted or recently released, start appearing in rugby union clubs, particularly in the UK and South Africa. The switch is fueled by a shared emphasis on contact agility and short burst power, but there's little structure to the movement. Most arrive with no rugby experience, often entering through open trials or personal contacts. The early wave doesn't generate headlines, but it lays groundwork for a niche crossover that gains traction decades later. By the 2010s, the transition picks up pace. Carlin Isles, a sprinter who clocks 10.13 seconds in the 100 meters, joins the USA Sevens team in 2012 and scores 26 tries in his rookie season. Nate Ebner, a special team safety for the Patriots, wins Super Bowl XXL in 2015, then represents the U.S. in Rugby Sevens at the 2016 Olympics, becoming one of the few active NFL players to cross into international rugby. Meanwhile, Christian Wade scores 4 touchdowns in his final NFL preseason with the Buffalo Bills, then announces his switch to rugby in 2019. Why 2022, more than 30 American athletes, most with college football pedigrees, are actively trialing with Premiership rugby clubs. The pipeline is now visible, formal, and growing. The Wade Experiment. In October 2019, Christian Wade, a 5'9" return specialist who logged 68 NFL games and 152 return yards with the Buffalo Bills, announces his surprise departure from the league. At age 28, he signs a professional rugby contract with Wasps RFC in England's Gallagher Premiership, a rare move in the opposite direction of the typical athlete migration. Wade, a former England under-20 rugby international, before his NFL stint reintroduces himself to the 15-a-side game after 6 years in American football. Within minutes of his debut against Northampton Saints, he scores a 50-meter try on first touch, making headlines across both sports. The clip generates over 2 million views in a week and draws international attention to the growing NFL to rugby crossover. Despite his early success, Wade's return to rugby proves short-lived. After signing a 3-year contract with Wasps, he struggles with injury and squad depth, logging fewer than 20 senior appearances before being released in early 2022. He later re-enters the NFL via the Las Vegas Raiders practice squad, though without breaking into the 53-man roster. Wade, speaking to UK media in 2020, clarifies that "I'm not trying to be Jonah Lomu," signaling both respect for rugby icons and realistic expectations for the switch. His case, while not a sustained success, signals to scouts on both sides that NFL-level speed and field vision can translate immediately to rugby attack. That test case drives renewed interest in speed-based athletes like Carlin Isles. Iceless effect. In 2012, Carlin Isles joins the USA Sevens program after failing to secure a full-time roster spot with the Detroit Lions. At the time, Isles is best known as a track athlete, having clocked a 100-meter time of 10.13 seconds, still the fastest sprint ever recorded by a professional rugby player. Within his rookie year, Isles scores 26 tries on the World Rugby Sevens Series circuit, quickly earning the nickname the fastest man in rugby. His breakaway pace and sideline runs consistently beat international defenses, putting the U.S. on highlight reels, typically reserved for Tier 1 nations like New Zealand and Fiji. Isles' viral footage, particularly his solo 80-meter tries, draws over 50 million views across YouTube and World Rugby platforms between 2013 and 2016. Major U.S. sports outlets, including ESPN and Bleacher Report, pick up his story, branding him a crossover anomaly with world-class speed and raw instinct. Though Isles never returns to football, his brief NFL pedigree gives his rugby story added credibility for American audiences. More importantly, his success as a high-performance convert validates rugby as a post-NFL career option for speed-based specialists, particularly wide receivers and return men. Isles' breakout year reshapes MLR scouting strategy and sets the foundation for programs like the NFL International Pathway to start watching rugby tape in reverse. NFL rejects rugby stars. Across the 2020s, a new trend emerges inside Major League Rugby rosters. A steady stream of former NCAA and NFL athletes cut from practice squads or training camps begin appearing as regular starters. In 2023 alone, 9 active MLR players have direct football backgrounds, most transitioning after being released by pro teams or overlooked in the NFL draft. Paul Lasike, once a bruising fullback at BYU and later signed by the Chicago Bears, becomes a core figure for the USA Eagles, starting at inside center in multiple World Cup qualifiers. His conversion works largely because of positional overlap. His low center of gravity, 240-pound frame, and short yardage explosiveness translate seamlessly to rugby's crash ball phase play. Corey Daniels' case is even more stark. After being waived by Washington in 2021, the 6-foot linebacker retrains as a back row enforcer for Old Glory DC, earning national selection within 2 seasons. Unlike Lasike, Daniel has no formal rugby background prior to signing with the MLR club, highlighting a broader strategy among teams prioritize athletic ceiling over rugby fluency, then backfill technique with coaching. Ty Gangi, a former quarterback, briefly contracted by the Cleveland Browns, shifts roles, entirely taking reps at fly half for the Utah Warriors in 2022 despite minimal kicking experience. Because rugby's playmaking roles demand decision-making under fatigue, more than arm strength, quarterbacks like Gangi are seen as adaptable provided they can learn spacing and support patterns. These transitions don't always work, but they reinforce a pattern. Rugby is becoming a legitimate second-chance sport for football players who just missed the NFL threshold. MLR Pipeline. Major League Rugby launches in 2018 with 7 founding teams, and a clear strategy grow the domestic talent pool by tapping into America's vast football infrastructure. From its inception, the league includes several former NFL and NCAA players, many of them converted backs or linebackers who bring high-level athleticism, but minimal rugby training. Teams like the Utah Warriors Rugby ATL and Houston SaberCats establish early reputations for aggressive football recruitment, offering trial contracts to athletes released from NFL practice squads or graduating from college programs without pro offers. By the 2022 season, MLR rosters list at least 17 players with direct NCAA Division I or NFL experience. This figure reflects a deliberate pipeline rather than coincidence. Franchises increasingly view undrafted football players as raw materials for rugby, provided they can learn spatial awareness and phase patterns. The league's coaching staff adopts a mantra: football instincts, rugby skills, to frame its approach. Take the aggression and decision-making from football, then teach the rhythm of multi-phase play. To streamline this process, MLR scouts begin using NFL Combine metrics, 40-yard dash, vertical leap shuttle time as preliminary filters for rugby suitability. Because the overlap in athletic profile is so strong, teams save time on fitness screening and focus development on skill acquisition. The system doesn't just fill roster spots, it formalizes rugby as a secondary career path for football talent, which sets the groundwork for rugby-specific training centers to partner with ex-football programs. Rugby's tackle advantage. In 2016, USA Rugby partners with youth football programs to introduce rugby-style tackling as a safer alternative to traditional hit-based techniques. Unlike the head-first form often taught in American football, rugby's method emphasizes shoulder contact, low center of gravity wraps, and head placement behind the ball carrier. Early data shows promise. Within 2 years of implementation, pilot programs report a 25% reduction in concussion rates. This change in tackling form prompts attention at higher levels, especially as football's concussion crisis gains visibility in the media and medical research. By 2017, several NFL teams, including the Seattle Seahawks and Atlanta Falcons, begin incorporating rugby tackle mechanics into preseason training camps. The goal is clear: reduce helmet-to-helmet collisions without sacrificing defensive effectiveness. Meanwhile, over 15 NCAA Division I football programs integrate rugby tackle drills into spring practices, often hiring consultants with rugby union backgrounds. Coaches find that players adapt quickly, retaining aggression while lowering injury risk. Ironically, the sport played without pads becomes the model for making America's most violent game safer. The growing acceptance of rugby-based tackling not only shifts how football teaches defense, but also opens a lane for rugby professionals to enter coaching roles across U.S. football systems. The money gap. In 2016, the NFL league minimum salary for a veteran player is $900,000, a figure that climbs to $9,000 to $15,000 by 2024. In contrast, the average annual wage in Major League Rugby sits below $40,000, and even top-tier European clubs rarely offer more than $200,000 per season to imported talent. Christian Wade, once a high-salaried return man in the NFL system, earns under $200,000 per year when he signs with Wasps RFC. For context, that's less than a quarter of what he could have made remaining on a practice squad, let alone as a rostered NFL special teamer. The disparity in financial upside is not marginal, it's structural. Because of this, rugby fails to attract NFL starters or even high-value backups. Nate Ebner, a special team safety with the Patriots, only leaves football temporarily after securing a Super Bowl ring and a guaranteed contract. His switch to Rugby Sevens comes with the full support of head coach Bill Belichick, and only because he has already banked millions in salary. The lesson is consistent. Rugby appeals to fringe athletes or former prospects who fall short of the NFL threshold, not those comfortably earning 6- or 7-figure salaries. As one coach put it flatly, you don't leave $1 million on the table for a scrum. The massive earnings gap explains why rugby's American recruiting targets skew young, unsigned, and highly mobile. NFL athletic profile. In 2024, the NFL's veteran minimum salary reaches $950,000, continuing a trend of rising base pay across the league. Even practice squad contracts often exceed $200,000 annually, particularly for second and third-year players. Meanwhile, rugby's professional tiers offer a stark contrast. Major League Rugby players average under $40,000 per season, and only a handful of European club signings clear the $200,000 threshold. Christian Wade, whose move from the Buffalo Bills to Wasps in 2019 made headlines, earns roughly $200,000 in his peak rugby contract, less than a quarter of what an NFL backup return specialist might expect to make. That economic divide serves as a hard ceiling. Rugby is not financially competitive with the NFL at any level above fringe status. This dynamic shapes who makes the leap from football to rugby. Nate Ebner, a longtime Patriots special teams asset, only leaves the NFL after securing a roster spot and banking multiple seasons of earnings. His transition to Olympic rugby in 2016 is the exception that proves the rule: it works because he's financially secure. Most rugby-bound athletes are undrafted free agents cut from practice squads or recent college grads facing long odds in the NFL. As one MLR coach puts it bluntly, you don't leave $1 million on the table for a scrum. Because of this, the typical NFL to rugby recruit isn't a starter. It's a fast physical specialist looking for a second career. The next step is how these athletes adapt on the field once they switch codes. Global spread. In 2016, France's Racing 92, then a top 14 finalist, quietly begins experimenting with crossover athletes, inviting a small group of ex-football players into its 2021 development camp. The move is driven not by marketing, but by metrics. The club's analytics staff wants to test whether NFL-caliber acceleration and hip flexibility translate to backline roles under top 14 contact rules. The early results, though mixed, confirm one key insight: former football players adjust quickly to rugby's breakdown tempo when placed in wing and outside center positions. Because of this, French clubs widen their search criteria and begin importing American athletic profiles for short-term evaluation. By 2022, Japan's League One signs 3 former NFL players in a single season, including practice squad defensive backs and a wide receiver with a 4.42 40 time. These signings reflect more than novelty. They serve a dual role as marketing assets and potential skill position reinforcements. Meanwhile, Australian NRL scouts admit in interviews that they review NFL combine footage annually, particularly when recruiting for winger roles. This global interest peaks in 2023 when the Welsh Rugby Union hosts a crossover trial camp in Cardiff, open to any American football player with a verified NCAA background. What began as a US-centric transition is now internationalized, with rugby federations from Europe to Oceania actively mining American football systems for high-upside recruits. That global shift begins pushing formal partnerships between the NFL and rugby academies. Coaching crossover. In 2014, Pete Carroll brings in a rugby tackle consultant during Seahawks preseason, citing concern over head injuries and form technique. The hire leads to the implementation of shoulder-led wrap-style tackling, directly inspired by rugby union standards. By 2016, Seattle's defense records a significant drop in helmet-to-helmet penalties, and the system gains traction around the league. The Atlanta Falcons follow suit after their 2017 Super Bowl collapse, installing full contact drills based on open-field rugby mechanics. The coaching staff identifies missed tackles and late-game fatigue as critical fail points, which rugby-style technique aims to reduce by optimizing body position and balance. This cross-code exchange deepens in the early 2020s. USA Rugby hires a former NFL strength coach to join the Eagles national team setup in 2020, citing the need for periodized recovery plans used in football training cycles. Meanwhile, MLR's San Diego Legion appoints a retired NFL defensive back as its specialist defense coach, tasked with refining backline pressure and spacing using zone coverage principles. The flow of technique is no longer one-directional. Football contributes conditioning systems and structural discipline, while rugby offers real-time contact form and endurance adaptation. The migration of ideas between the two sports accelerates when formal scouting and data-sharing partnerships emerge across leagues. When positions don't translate. In 2016, multiple crossover camps begin testing American football players in rugby drills, but results reveal a clear pattern. Most NFL positions don't map cleanly to the demands of rugby. Quarterbacks in particular struggle with continuous play, accustomed to snap-based decision windows and frequent stoppages. They falter in rugby's high-tempo, phase-driven structure. Even those with elite arm strength find the transition difficult, as rugby's tactical kicking demands different mechanics and field vision. Kickers face an entirely separate set of challenges, while their footwork often impresses in isolated drills. Their lack of tackling instincts and open field movement makes them defensive liabilities in game settings. The mismatch becomes even more obvious with linemen. NFL offensive and defensive linemen average over 300 pounds and rely on short, explosive bursts between whistles. In rugby, where matches span 80 continuous minutes and open field stamina is essential, most linemen prove too slow or too large to maintain pace. Coaches begin narrowing their recruiting focus to NFL skill positions, running backs, wide receivers, linebackers, and defensive backs whose athletic profiles better match rugby's mobility and contact patterns. One MLR talent scout sums it up concisely: only 5% of NFL players fit rugby. Because of this mismatch, teams invest more heavily in identifying traits rather than positions, shifting recruitment away from rosters and toward movement data. NCAA feeder system. In 2022, Major League Rugby franchises draft 4 players directly from NCAA football programs, marking the first year this type of recruitment occurs at scale. While the raw athleticism of these athletes is rarely in question, most posts verified 40 times under 4.6 seconds and vertical leaps over 33 inches. Their rugby knowledge base is limited. Over 80% of these college players report no formal exposure to rugby before age 22, meaning their understanding of off-ball movement, ruck entry, and defensive alignment is near zero at the time of signing. Programs like BYU and Cal, long considered dual-code institutions, begin actively mining their football walk-on rosters for crossover candidates, athletes who fail to crack depth charts but possess elite conditioning and change-of-direction ability. USA Rugby formalizes this approach with its Pathway 404 initiative, which in 2021 establishes data-sharing relationships with over a dozen NCAA schools. The goal is explicit: identify players with football backgrounds and introduce them to rugby in a structured setting before their eligibility expires. But while strength and speed transfer cleanly, tactical awareness lags behind. Coaches cite rugby IQ, a catch-all for things like reading phase structure and recognizing defensive mismatches, as the biggest limiting factor in accelerating these transitions. Because rugby lacks the rigid playbook framework of American football decision-making in motion, becomes a steep learning curve. Therefore, while the NCAA remains a deep pool of talent, it requires deliberate scaffolding to convert into professional-caliber rugby players. High school conversion camps. In 2017, USA Rugby launches its first round of crossover identification camps, targeting football-rich regions across 12 states. The initiative aims to repurpose high school athletes, particularly those with defensive instincts, into long-term rugby prospects. Within the first 2 years, 14% of total attendees report varsity-level football experience, making them ideal candidates for a sport that rewards contact technique and lateral agility. Coaches note that these athletes adapt quickly to the defensive side of the game, especially in tackle-first systems, where body positioning and aggression are prioritized over ball handling. By 2021, the pipeline yields its first professional output. 6 Major League Rugby players are confirmed to have entered the league through high school rugby combines. While the success rate remains modest, the system proves scalable football-trained players show clear upside if recruited early enough. However, cost presents a consistent obstacle. Between gear travel and tournament entry fees, families face expenses that regularly exceed $3,000 per year. Because most of these camps operate without school sponsorship, rugby becomes a pay-to-play commitment that filters out low-income athletes regardless of athletic promise. The financial ceiling limits how deep the recruitment model can go, setting the stage for future reform as USA Rugby tries to scale access. Media moments. In 2019, Christian Wade's sideline-stepping try for Wasps RFC airs on ESPN's SportsCenter, marking one of the first times a rugby highlight featuring an ex-NFL player reaches mainstream American sports television. The play, which sees Wade beat 3 defenders in open space, goes viral within 24 hours. Not because of its significance in the match outcome, but because Wade had formerly worn a Buffalo Bills jersey. This moment repositions rugby as something familiar to football fans, fast, physical, and tied to names they already recognize. ESPN's editorial framing emphasizes Wade's athletic background more than the match context, underscoring how crossover appeal, not team allegiance, drives audience interest. By 2020, rugby begins appearing in promotional reels far beyond the sport's core demographic. U.S. sprinter turned rugby wing Carlin Isles becomes a recurring figure in NBC's Olympic previews, with his 40-yard dash time of 4.22 seconds repeatedly highlighted in marketing scripts. His clips rack up over 30 million views across social platforms by mid-2021, often accompanied by NFL comparisons or analysis by former players. That same year, NFL Films produces a Rugby v Says Football documentary segment for Amazon Prime, positioning rugby as the pure form of contact. Sport fewer pads, continuous play, equal risk. Former Colts punter Pat McAfee calls rugby players NFL guys in armor, a line that circulates widely on Twitter and YouTube. These media moments do not increase rugby match attendance directly, but they reshape its image in the American psyche, making it seem adjacent to, rather than foreign from, football. The perception shift opens the door for more ambitious crossover campaigns. The tipping point. In early 2024, Christian Wade, once a Buffalo Bills return man and former Premiership rugby standout, signs a high-visibility ambassador deal with Major League Rugby. His role is not limited to brand awareness. Wade now appears in combine footage training promos and crossover camps designed to recruit NCAA football players into rugby's domestic league. Simultaneously, MLR franchises begin offering partial rugby scholarships to NCAA seniors who miss the NFL draft cut. These athletes, many of whom hold verified 40-yard dash times under 4.6 seconds in verticals above 32 inches, receive stipends to train and travel with development squads through the offseason. The strategy focuses on players who have exhausted their NCAA eligibility but remain physically active, essentially creating a third option funnel behind the NFL and CFL. By mid-2024, both IMG Academy and Exos, 2 of the most prestigious elite athletic development centers in the U.S., formally add rugby instruction modules to their off-season football programs. The move reflects a small but meaningful shift in perception, Rugby is no longer seen as a foreign fallback, but as a viable skill-based alternative for unsigned talent. NFL agents in turn begin quietly listing rugby as a plan C on post-draft strategy sheets behind the XFL and CFL, but ahead of full retirement or arena leagues. These changes are incremental. No major wave of players exits the NFL pipeline, but the shift is noticeable. What was once a novelty career switch now has institutional scaffolding, setting the stage for the sport's first serious recruitment crossover.